Day of judgment. This is the 6th article of faith. Human beings are fully accountable for their actions. According to the Islamic tradition, there is a day in which all of the souls are resurrected. Now also, just to relate this in terms of where the accountability comes in. According to the Quranic view, human beings were brought into the presence of God, and God said, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And all of the souls answered in affirmation. And this is the proof. And so what happens in this world is the soul is to be reminded of this. It's the parent's challenge to remind the child until it becomes firmly rooted in them that God is their Lord and they should submit to God. If not, then prophets come and they tell people and they should submit to them. The day of judgment is a day when the debts fall due. That is how it's called in the Qur'an. Yawm ad-Din, the day the debts fall due. The day the debts. Yawm ad-Din. Yeah, it's very similar in the Hebrew, have that as well. Yawm ad-Din. The day the debts fall due. So there is an idea that we are going to be taken into account. Now the Prophet Muhammad said, Hasibu qabla an tuhasabu, take yourself to account before you are taken to account. So there is an idea that the human being can take themselves to account in this world. And is encouraged as a spiritual practice before you go to sleep to go through your day and to ask forgiveness for the wrongs you did and ask for acceptance for the rights you did. That is a highly encouraged spiritual practice within the Islamic tradition. And if one does that with perseverance and sincerity, then that is in a sense a lesser reckoning. It is a way of facilitating the day of judgment. Now there's an idea, I'll just go through the afterlife experience in the Islamic tradition, what happens here. The very first thing, there is a pre-worldly existence. And this is the existence of the spirits, the souls, before we came into this world. The next stage is the worldly existence, and this is called dunya. Now it's interesting, in the Arabic language, dunya in Arabic means the lowest. In other words, this is the lowest, we're at the lowest level. What is above us is hierarchy. The highest level is the presence of God. Dunya is the lowest level. This is the life of this world. In the Qur'an is called hayatud dunya. The root word of dunya is, one of the meanings is grapes, like the famous fox in Aesop's fables. The grapes are just out of reach. And that is the nature of this world. There is an element in this world that the soul will never be content as long as it is in this world. But it will attempt to satiate its desires through the world. This is, like in Hinduism, they have the idea of the sensual, or even Kierkegaard's system. The idea of the aesthete, the person who spends their life in sensual experiences. These are attempts at assuaging this turbulence within the human soul. From the Muslim point of view, this is futile. The soul will never be at peace as long as it is attempting to fill the vacuum or the emptiness through worldly experience. One of the things that I think is happening in this culture now is human beings have become very jaded in their experiences. There's a need for continual and more extreme stimulation. It relates to I think a lot of it relates to the stimulation that people have with television. Murders, violence, sexual stimulation. All of this stimulation is taking place within the brain. MTV is a very, I think, a powerful example of this, of just massive stimulation. What's happening, even I think Sesame Street, which is in a lot of ways seen as a very positive thing, I think for teachers it's a disaster. Because you're competing with entertainment. A child begins to think that, you have to be entertained to learn. There has to be these cartoons coming in and this and that, and it all has to be fast. There's a cartoon of a little boy sitting in front of a forest and asking his father, "What's the plot?" Right? So there's this idea, of really, just this culture has become massive stimulation. Toffler's The Fast World. There's a beautiful film called Pawakatsi? Pawakatsi. Is the second one Pawakatsi? Wonderful film by a local filmmaker. And one of the things that he does in there is he's got the third world in slow motion. Right? So you see people like farming in Brazil and things. Traditional farming is all in slow motion. But then when he switches to America, it's all fast motion. And it's interesting what he's trying, what he's juxtaposing. Like he showed people eating in fast food restaurants really fast, and it's very, very strong to watch it. But the point being is that we are in a hyper-stimulatory state. What happens you reach thresholds, you want more stimulation. Now, there are people now that go out and do things to taste the moment that become very extreme and violent. Gangbangers. You see, adrenaline junkies. When I was in an intensive care unit, and I used to go down to the ERs sometime, and in the ER room, it's really interesting that what a lot of the nurses that work in ERs and doctors do on the weekends, jump out of airplanes, hang gliding, these jumping, bungee jumping. Because if you work in intensive care, crack a chest open, cardiac massage, very intense. They really get into the rush of adrenaline and things. And then on the weekend, it's like, what's there to do? That's an interesting phenomenon. Really, it really is. Adrenaline's a very powerful drug. And we forget that there really is an adrenaline, it's a very high drug. Right? And one of the things that happens when people, when they see things that they shouldn't see, you'll get, the heart begins to beat faster. Right? For instance, people that, they've done studies with people that watch pornography and things like that. Stimulation, rapid heartbeat, adrenaline rushes, things like that. Initially, but then more stimulation. They need more stimulation. Right? And the end result is a snuff film or something like that. Really, there's people that's what they need to be stimulated. These are very serious, from an Islamic worldview, very serious ways of attempting to assuage this emptiness, to feel alive. Now, for the Muslim, the goal in life is to reach a type of tranquility, not the stimulation. It is to reach a point where the stimulation is not needed for one to feel alive. That what one feels alive through a peace, an inner peace, which is achieved through worship. Through prayer and these things. So the dunya is the worldly existence, and the dunya also has 7 stages. The first stage is the infantile stage. Now it's interesting, the word in Arabic for the child is ghulam. The first stage of dunya is ghulam, which means lusty. That's what it means, ghulma, to lust. And this is the infantile state. There's a lust, there's a desire. And then it moves into the young adulthood. That ghulam goes to about 15 years of age, from birth to 15 years. And then young adulthood, which is where hopefully the child has been humanized in that first 15 years of life, to where that they're safe to the society and they're safety to themselves. Then it moves to what's called the kahl, or the middle-aged person.
What's the second stage called? First is lusty, second is?
The second is, it would be like a moving into what's called shabab, and it relates to fire. The second is shabab. And it comes from a root word which means fire. So this is where you have the fire of life. The first would be spring, the second would be like summer. There's a fire, it's heat, it's intensity, there's a lot of energy to do things. The third stage is reaching the kahal. which is related to maturity. It's related to productivity, where the person now, the fire has been used usefully, right? So there's something cooked there. There's been something cooked and it's something worthwhile now. There's benefit to be had. And then you go into the fourth, which is the adulthood, which is a rajul or imra'a, which is full. And this begins at 40, right? This begins at about 35, small window here. So youth is from about 15 to 35. This is 1 to 15. 40 is a very important year in the Islamic view, because it's when the human being is at their full maturity. The intellect is fully mature. The body has reached its full maturity. And now, from this point, you go into the fifth one is where you reach at about 60, and you go into what's called the sheikh period, where the person is now like an elder, somebody who they have wisdom, they have a type of presence within the society that is beneficial. Sheikh, S-H-A-I-K-H. And then, there's a stage here that's broken up, which would lead to 7, which is the sabi, which is the infant, first 5 years or first 7 years. But the last and final stage is called ajuz. And it's interesting that the male and the female are the same. There's no differentiation. It's a male, the word for ajuz applies to the male and the female. And this is where they've entered like 75, 80 years of age. There's a transcendence of the gender at this point. There's a type of, in fact, in the Islamic culture, traditionally, at about 60, the woman will begin to, there's open mixing in many, many cultures, traditionally, as the woman enters into that period of life. She's considered like there's a wisdom that she should be present, that she should be in that environment. And then ajuz is that last phase.